More than 30 Democrats are now calling on President Joe Biden to drop out of the presidential race. However, there are still some key lawmakers publicly supporting him.
He has the vision, I believe, the ability, the capacity, and the track record to make a case to the American people.
He's going to make the right decision for the country. If he decides, I've got this, I'm with him, we're going to make this happen.
Our president is weighing what he should weigh, which is who is the best candidate to win in November and to carry forward the Democratic Party's values. There are folks still saying he is not strong enough or capable enough to be our next president. I disagree.
Biden's team says he is still absolutely staying in the race, but what does this all mean for the state of the campaign? Antjuan Seawright is a Democratic political strategist, and Terry Szuplat is a former speechwriter for President Barack Obama and author of the upcoming book, Say It Well. They both join me now. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you both. Antjuan, about 10 more Democrats today are calling for Biden to step aside and let someone else take on Trump. That brings us, I think, now to more than 30 congressional Democrats demanding new leadership. What's your take? Can Biden survive this uprising?
Look, I am not one to dismiss the way people feel, because as I've said before, politics is a relationship game, and you should not dismiss the feelings of your partners. And I think all of these members of Congress and others are partners in the Democratic ecosystem. However, it doesn't make them right. It doesn't make them correct. It certainly does not mean they reflect the millions of voters, one, the 14 million who voted for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to be our respective nominees, and certainly does not make them reflective of the millions of people who want to defeat Donald Trump, Trump's Project 2025, and define his candidate, his running mate, J.D. Vance. And so as I spent time with the president in Nevada this week, certainly the conversation was different in Nevada than it was in Washington, D.C., and by the pundits who are trying to make headlines when this president is focused on making headway.
Terry, I take Antjuan's point that there are still millions of people that support Biden, but he has to bring some of those people that have fallen away back into the fold, right, if he wants to stay on. You've worked as a speechwriter with the Obama White House. You know about crafting a message. What does Biden have to say to quiet, first of all the Democrats who are now clamoring for new leadership at the top, but also try and bring some of the people that were willing to vote for Biden but have now soured on him back into the fold? What does he have to do to turn this around?
Sure, I would say what he has to do is what he's been doing, which is being out there as much as he can, being as aggressive as he can, being as available as he can, dispelling concerns that he's not up to the job. So the best way to do that is to show that you are up to the job, to do the job every day. He was doing that out on the campaign with some very vigorous speeches, which I have to say, any mistake, any stumble, any mumble gets played a million times. But when he goes out and gives a really powerful presentation, like he did several times out on the campaign trail, no one pays attention. It doesn't get the same kind of play. So he's in a very difficult position. Every day brings more fellow Democrats calling for him to step aside. But I would imagine he's eager to get back out there as soon as possible when he gets through COVID.
Yeah, Terry, you might have seen that the Biden campaign chair this morning said that there has been some slippage in his support, kind of conceding the point that maybe things aren't going so well. When you're thinking about messaging, when you're thinking about speech writing, Terry, is that something that the president himself should do more, perhaps kind of admit that things aren't going as well as they should be, but he's trying to turn it around? I mean, because the polls suggest he's losing in every battleground state, even some states like New Mexico, New Hampshire might be in play. Like, what does he have to tell the American people to try and staunch the bleeding?
Sure. Actually, this is something I talk about in the book that you mentioned, Say It Well. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of politicians make, a lot of leaders make, a lot of us make in our lives is we sometimes try to ignore the elephant in the room. And so one of the things that I always advise my clients when I work with them in politics and in business is to deal directly, forcefully, candidly, and honestly with the thing that everyone's talking about. And I have to say he's been out there. He's talked about, very next day after his debate performance, he acknowledged very candidly that he is, he doesn't speak as well as he used to, doesn't debate as well as he used to. So he's acknowledged that. I don't think he has to do that too much more. I think, again, the concern that some people have is with his physical ability to do the job. So the more he's out there doing it, moving around, traveling the country, delivering vigorous presentations, That's probably the best and most important thing he can do right now.
Antjuan, I don't want to belabor the point about the defections. I know that, it's maybe just a couple dozen or more congressional folks who are now calling on Biden to step aside. But we're looking at some pretty important figures here, aren't we? I mean, some people today calling on Biden to step aside are tied to Nancy Pelosi, of course, the former House leader, who is still a power broker in the Democratic Party. We also know that Chuck Schumer, the leader in the Senate, the Democratic leader, has also been demanding Biden be kind of clear-eyed about what the polls are saying about his future. And of course, Hakeem Jeffries has been kind of non-committal as well, the Democratic leader in the House. So these are some big names that are not quite sold on Biden. Does he have a viable candidacy if he doesn't have the party brass behind him?
Well, let me say a couple things. Number one, Hakeem Jeffries made it crystal clear that he is supporting President Biden and Vice President Harris at a press event earlier today. And so I think that needs, and that gives full clarity to where he stands as the House Minority Leader. And look, we're a diverse party. We pride ourselves on being a big tent party. So it's not uncommon for folks to have disagreements up under the tent. But as long as we're unified in one front, and that's defeating Donald Trump, Trump's Project 2025, and Trumpism down the ballot, to include the agenda that many of those House members who are calling for the president to step aside, the agenda that they marshaled through the Congress, that they received support on back at home. And so I think bringing clarity to the what and not necessarily the who is where we have to kind of lean in as Democrats and hone our focus, if you will. Look, I get we may not get to a place of unanimity, but we have to get to a place of unity, because we've seen, and my dear friend here on the other side also have witnessed in real time what happens when Democrats are not unified for one common goal. And we elected Donald Trump in 2016 because there were fractures in the bone at the base of the party. Some of the same language we heard publicly and privately. Trump becomes elected. Extremism gives a birthplace in this country. He puts 3 extremists on the nation's highest court for generations, and we're still feeling the residue and the aroma of the 2016 election.
Yeah, Terry, let's talk about unity, because the Republican Party seems to be united around Trump. There was a fairly strong showing for him this week in Milwaukee, right? All of the concerns about the election lie in January 6th and his involvement in that insurrection seemed to kind of melted away. The Never Trump wing has gone quiet. The Democrats, it's a different story. Sitting where you are now, are you a bit concerned about the fact that the Republicans have coalesced around Trump? There is no doubt about who is the leader of that party. We can't say the same about the Democrats, at least right now.
Well, I have to say, had you asked me that question yesterday, I might have had a different answer. But having sat and listened to Donald Trump's speech last night, I'm a little bit less concerned. So, his speech, he had promised a speech that would unify, that would help the country heal after the assassination attempt. He spoke for 90 minutes, and he essentially gave 2 separate speeches. First 30 minutes, he spoke, powerfully about the assassination attempt, and he called for unity, and he said we need to stop demonizing our opponents. And then he spent the next hour demonizing his opponents. He called Nancy Pelosi crazy. He referred to the China virus, COVID, as the China virus. And we know from the last few years that when politicians and people start talking about the virus that way, it contributes to sort of a rise in anti-Asian hate and hate crimes. People get hurt, people get killed. And he'll say one nice line about immigrants and then spend about 45 minutes demonizing immigrants, saying that they bring disease into the country, that they're taking away the jobs of Black Americans and Latino Americans. And so none of that is unifying. None of that helps the country heal. So once again, all over the media yesterday, people are asking, are we going to see a new Donald Trump? Or was Donald Trump going to change? Is he going to heal? Has he been humbled and changed? And we've been through this over and over again for more than a decade. It never happens. He is clearly not capable of the kind of unifying, healing rhetoric that the country needs right now. That's one of the major reasons that Joe Biden got elected in the first place. And I'll just say this, that every candidate, every president has strengths and vulnerabilities. One of President Joe Biden's greatest strengths, that even now that people continue to recognize, is his sense of empathy and his desire to try to heal the country. And so he's still got that going for him. And what a contrast that was to what we heard last night.
Antjuan, I only have about 30 seconds, but are you feeling a little bit better today after hearing what Terry described there with Trump's speech? I mean, it wasn't certainly on script. He wasn't much of a unifier last night.
But look, I believe that the disagreements we may appear to have amongst each other do not compare to the disagreements we know we have with Donald Trump, Project 2025, and the extremists on the other side. That has to be our rallying cry. That has to be our focus. That has to be our mission, defeating the extremism in this country, because the country cannot overheat anymore with that type of activity.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, Antjuan Seawright and Terry Szuplat. Appreciate you coming on, gentlemen.